Lee Changjae had been caught in a devastating road accident. He had been struck by a speeding vehicle and left sprawled on the wet road, his body drenched in blood, while his motorcycle lay in ruins some distance away. In that semi-conscious state, he had begun to reflect on how fleeting and meaningless life truly was. Thoughts swirled in his fading mind. Death could arrive in an instant, without warning and without reason. His blurry vision caught sight of a car nearby, presumably the one responsible for the accident. A woman had been standing next to it, but instead of reaching for her phone to call emergency services, she had simply stood there, her expression blank and detached. He had found himself wondering why she wasn't dialing for help. At that moment, it seemed like the most logical and humane thing to do. To his shock and disbelief, she had quietly stepped back into her vehicle and driven away, leaving him bleeding and helpless on the road. Rather than feeling angry, he had sunk deeper into a sense of futility. There had been no rage left in him, only a cold acceptance of how cruel and indifferent life could be. Born into poverty, he had struggled tirelessly to create a better future for himself, only to end up abandoned in the middle of the road with no one to care. The following morning, a poster had been placed near the site of the accident. It had been from the police, seeking any witnesses to a hit-and-run incident with a contact number provided. Even the gesture had felt hollow to him. He had questioned whether anyone would ever come forward for someone like him, someone without status or recognition. He had recalled hearing somewhere that every human life carried some divine purpose. He had wondered then, if a God truly existed, what purpose had that God intended for him? In the haze of near-death, something unimaginable had occurred. A glowing screen had suddenly appeared before his eyes. It had radiated a celestial light unlike anything of this world. On it, a message had been displayed: "Your discontent has been noted. As a reward, you have been granted a fresh start. Please tell us your desired life." Still barely conscious, he had stared at the screen in confusion. The divine glow of the display had given him the impression that it had descended from the heavens. The question had repeated itself again, prompting him to state what life he desired. He had wondered aloud if this meant he had been resurrected. The screen had confirmed that he had indeed been revived and that he simply needed to choose the new life he wanted. It had all felt surreal to him, like a story out of a fantasy novel. As he continued to process the situation, the screen had again responded, this time telling him that a set of skills would be granted to him based on the reward he selected. Admitting to himself that he had never had the luxury to think about what he truly wanted, he had confessed that he wasn't sure what kind of life to choose. Life had always been about survival for him. The screen had then offered to make the choice on his behalf if he could not decide. After a pause, he had agreed, realizing that having been given a second chance, he had nothing left to lose. However, he had added one condition: he had wanted a life that was exciting, filled with wealth and surrounded by women. The screen had acknowledged his request and presented him with a preview. A question had appeared: would you like to be a father? A cult leader? The options had struck him as strange, even amusing. It had felt oddly satisfying to be offered a choice for once in his life. The term cult had made him hesitate, yet two women had suddenly appeared before him, addressing him as father. The screen had asked again whether he wished to proceed with this life or select a different one. He had silently concluded that the offer suited him perfectly. He had decided to accept. Becoming a cult leader had seemed bizarre, but also exhilarating. Later, he had found himself in the staff room of the restaurant where he worked, sitting across from his manager. The man had been yelling at him furiously, demanding to know why Changjae had canceled the deliveries and destroyed the motorcycle. He had accused him of being irresponsible and had questioned what he planned to do with his life. Changjae had responded in a calm tone, telling him that he was done working at the restaurant, that he had been resurrected and that nothing tied him to the job anymore. The manager had shouted back, asking if he thought he could simply run away from his responsibilities. Changjae nodded and assured him that he had no need for the job anymore. The manager, growing increasingly irritated, had demanded that he pay for the damage to the motorcycle. Changjae, on the other hand, had been distracted by another message appearing on the glowing screen: Cult Leadership Command. You can control someone for 10 minutes. Use a deep, commanding voice. Emotions, however, cannot be controlled. He had found the skill to be oddly specific. He had questioned whether it would truly work. As the manager had continued threatening to call the police, Changjae had contemplated testing the command. Despite his doubts, he had decided to try. He had told the manager that he had no intention of paying for anything but instead expected a severance payment, 10,000 won to be precise. In response, the manager had unexpectedly received a transaction notification on his phone: exactly 10,000 won transferred. The confused manager had asked if the amount was acceptable and Changjae had affirmed that it was. At that point, it had become undeniably clear to him: the power was real. There could be no other explanation. To test it further, he had called the manager again. When the manager had irritably asked what he wanted now, Changjae had told him that he needed a beating. The manager, expressionless, had simply said that he would stand still. Changjae had gone further, instructing the man to smash his own head against Changji's fist. The manager had obeyed, even asking how many times he should do it. Later that evening, under the hot spray of a shower at home, Changjae had quietly reflected on the surreal turn his life had taken. The manager had begged him to stop and handed over the cash, just as commanded. There had been no room left for doubt. His powers were real. For the first time in his life, Lee Changjae had felt what it meant to be in control. As he lay on his bed, his eyes were fixed on the strange screen before him. He found himself murmuring aloud, asking if he could refer to it as a status window. The words on the screen responded immediately, stating that he could call it whatever he wished. While continuing to gaze at the window, he asked another question, wondering whether he possessed any other powers. In response, the screen informed him that he could acquire additional skills as he leveled up. Intrigued, he followed up with another question, trying to confirm if there were indeed more levels to reach. The status window explained that the more frequently he used his existing skills, the higher his level would eventually become. He mused aloud, contemplating the implication that he would have to use his skills often. He mentioned his desire to obtain more powers and began wondering who he could possibly use them on. Just as he remained lying on the bed, lost in thought, the quiet was interrupted by persistent knocking on the door. A voice from outside called out, asking him to open the door, asserting that the person knew he was inside. He wondered silently who could be visiting him at such a late hour. When he opened the door, a girl stood there, demanding to know where her rent was. She insisted he pay it on time so she wouldn't have to come knocking again. This girl was Park Minju. He responded apologetically, claiming he had forgotten about it. Minju didn't hesitate and told him to pay her right away or transfer the amount to her account. It was then explained that Minju was the daughter of the building's owner. She essentially managed the place while her mother was abroad. She added, with a firm tone, that because of his repeated delays, she would now increase his rent by 51. Inwardly, he couldn't help but think how easy life must be for someone like her born into wealth and privilege. When he failed to respond, she grew impatient and questioned why he wasn't answering. As he looked at her, he couldn't help but notice that she appeared like a good potential partner. He admitted that he would still pay her the rent and apologized once more for the delay. Then, out of nowhere, he casually asked if she was going out that evening. Minju, appearing slightly taken aback, remarked that he looked rather nice today. Confused, he asked her what she meant, but her mood quickly shifted as she scolded him, telling him to stop annoying her and dragging things out. She demanded that he just pay her already. She continued by saying she didn't want to continue the conversation any longer. He was somewhat surprised and asked whether she wasn't being a bit too harsh, even if he had been late. But she dismissed him completely, stating she didn't care and was only there because she was dressed up to go eat with her boyfriend. She instructed him to stop asking foolish questions and told him bluntly that she knew he didn't have the money. She gave him an ultimatum: either send the money by tomorrow or vacate the premises. Internally, he felt irritation bubbling up. Her harsh words were really beginning to get under his skin. As he stared at her, a mischievous thought crossed his mind: he could use his powers to teach Park Minju a lesson in manners. Feigning calm, he told her he would pay the rent right away but requested that she come inside his house first. Minju looked at him incredulously, asking whether he was joking. She demanded to know why she should go in, suspecting he might be planning something. She made it clear that she had no intention of stepping inside or listening to him. At that moment, the status window suddenly reappeared, declaring that the cult leader command had been activated on Park Minju. Alongside the message, a status bar and a duration timer were displayed. As if compelled, Minju walked into the house. Both of them sat on the sofa. She looked around in confusion, unable to understand what was happening. She wondered silently what she was even doing there, how her body had moved on its own the moment he told her to come in. She couldn't believe he suddenly had enough money to pay rent. She even wondered if he had robbed a bank. This wasn't the same timid and quiet man she had known. His demeanor had changed completely. He handed her a thick bundle of cash, telling her it covered the rent for both the current month and the next. She stared at the money in astonishment, thanking him politely while thinking to herself that she needed to leave the place as quickly as possible. But just as she was about to leave, he grabbed her wrist. He told her that before he gave her the money, he wanted something in return. Shocked, she asked him what he meant by that, begging him to let go, telling him that her hand hurt. She said she couldn't believe what he was saying. He brought up her earlier words that she didn't want to speak to him and had said so many harsh things. He questioned why someone like her wouldn't think a man like him could bring her into his home. Alarmed, she asked him if he was insane and repeated her question, what did he mean by something in return? With a cold and casual tone, he told her it was simple. She was a grown woman and should understand what he was implying. He even offered her an excuse, suggesting that if she left, she could tell herself she only did it for the money. He said he wouldn't pay her if she walked out, giving her the option to rationalize it however she pleased. Minju, increasingly disturbed, told him that what he was saying was wrong and strange. Yet, even as her thoughts raced, she realized with growing dread that her body was no longer under her control, it was moving entirely on its own. She told him firmly that he couldn't go back on his words later. He responded with a nod, saying that if he was satisfied with the upcoming workout session, he would let her go home, and from now on, she should act as his partner. She questioned aloud how she had even ended up in such a situation, unable to comprehend how things had come to this. As he looked at her, his thoughts wandered. He wondered what his first encounter with Park Minju had been like and soon found himself slipping into a vivid memory. Back then, he had been standing on the rooftop terrace, quietly smoking, when Minju passed by him. She had been dressed elegantly as if she was heading somewhere important. Upon spotting him, she had stopped and asked in a slightly condescending tone if he was a delivery man, questioning why he was smoking there. He had told her that he had just moved into the rooftop room and now lived there. She replied casually that the broker had mentioned a new tenant moving in and then asked his age. When he said he was 24, she remarked that they were the same age and informed him that she was the daughter of the building's owner, implying she had authority over the place. He had offered a handshake with a friendly tone, saying he would be in her care from now on. However, she had pulled her hand back harshly, clearly unimpressed. He had been taken aback by her cold reaction. She had warned him not to hang around the stairwell late at night and not to smoke, stating bluntly that if he didn't follow the rules, he'd be kicked out. With those final words, she had walked downstairs, calling him a careless tenant as she left. He had stood there, still processing the encounter, wondering what kind of person she was. Then, from the rooftop, he noticed Minju standing below with another boy, likely her boyfriend. That had been the very first time he had met Park Minju. Changjae remembered how flustered he had felt back then, his emotions tangled in confusion. Down below, Minju's boyfriend had asked her if she knew the delivery guy. She had responded dismissively, telling him not to worry and that it seemed the man had just moved in. That brief moment of flustered interest had quickly shifted into envy. Minju had turned to her boyfriend and asked if he had gotten a new car. The boyfriend had laughed, explaining that the car wasn't his yet, it belonged to his father. Changjae had felt a pang of jealousy. Being born rich seemed like a luxury out of his reach. Minju had gone on to ask about the cost of the car and mentioned wanting one for herself. Her boyfriend had said it cost around 6 million won. She had laughed and said she might ask her mother to buy it for her. Changjae could tell she was someone who had always been spoiled and never reprimanded, her life drenched in comfort and attention. He had overheard her asking her boyfriend where they were headed, to which the boyfriend replied with a chuckle that they were going to a place where the wind touched gently. Watching her from behind, Changjae had thought bitterly that she belonged to an entirely different world, a world of comfort and luxury, while he remained shackled by poverty and struggle. He had seen her hand over a card to her boyfriend, insisting that she wouldn't ride for free and telling him to use the card for gas. The boyfriend accepted it casually. At that moment, Changjae had felt convinced that a girl like her would never associate with someone like him, a mere delivery worker. Snapping back to the present, Minju was now sitting in his room, both of them preparing for a yoga session. She asked him what he was doing, questioning whether he intended for her to stay there all night. She reluctantly agreed, though, seeming eager to finish the session quickly and leave. He looked at her, noticing how she sat at his feet, and thought to himself that he should make the session quick. She, too, was thinking that if she could just get through the yoga exercises quickly, she could leave right after. After the session, he commented that she was better than he had expected. Observing her expression, he noted silently that she still looked quite irritated. It seemed she still clung to her pride, perhaps because it had been a long time since anyone had challenged her. She asked curtly whether the session was done and if she could leave. At that moment, the status window displayed the remaining time of the command's effect. As she handed him all the money and turned to leave, he noticed there was still some time left. She, on the other hand, was confused, questioning herself silently about why she was still lingering in his room. He looked at the screen and asked what would happen once the cult leader command duration ended. The screen responded that when the time expired, the target would act according to his desires. He thought to himself that it meant he could do anything he wanted within that window. Even if he ordered her to continue the yoga session, she would only stop 3 minutes later. The time was limited, but he considered the opportunity. She interrupted his thoughts, asking again what he was doing. He responded casually that he was running an experiment. In his mind, he resolved to push her further. He wanted to make her as enthusiastic about the workout session as he was. He began teaching her more advanced exercise techniques, and soon the status window indicated that the cult leader command had been reactivated, displaying a new duration timer. However, as they continued, she started feeling uneasy and questioned whether they should stop the exercise. She was beginning to sense something strange. Her thoughts became more anxious. If they kept going like this, she felt she'd become too exhausted. Just then, the status window showed that the time limit had ended. The cult leader command no longer worked on Park Min-ju, it had expired. After the workout ended, he looked at her and remarked that her reaction had been better than he had anticipated, noting that she seemed like she had been starving for this kind of attention or challenge. She, meanwhile, found it all very strange. Her mind felt blank and she couldn't summon the strength to move her body properly. He asked her whether she had any complaints about what had happened. But her thoughts were growing heavier. She felt the need to stop him from continuing with any further sessions. If it went on like this, she felt she might die from sheer exhaustion. She finally called out his name. He turned toward her and acknowledged her with a calm, yes. Park Min-ju, watching her expression closely. Changjae suggested they begin the workout session again, thinking it was time to resume. However, Min-ju interrupted his intention by stating that she needed to take a shower first, explaining that she was sweating too much. As she walked toward the bathroom, Changjae remained seated outside, quietly observing the status window in front of him. His mind wandered as he processed the situation, realizing that he had expected her to refuse outright and flee, yet here she was willingly heading into the shower. This unexpected turn of events didn't seem like a bad deal for him at all. While he waited, the status window presented a new message, informing him that he had completed the quest. It declared that the cult leader command had been used 2 times and congratulated him, announcing that a new reward had been unlocked, believer management. The system explained that Park Min-ju had been successfully registered as his believer and that he now had the ability to manage her as a follower. It elaborated that he could raise her loyalty and faith, emphasizing that the higher her faith was, the more likely she would be to obey his commands. Changjae paused to consider the concept of faith and asked mentally what exactly it entailed. The status window responded that faith could be increased when the believer experienced happiness because of him. As he processed the idea, a detailed profile of Park Min-ju appeared, labeling her as a believer filled with doubt. The entry explained that she was the type who would pretend to follow commands only when she was frightened or had no better option. This clarified the reason why she had gone into the bathroom so suddenly, and it became evident to him that her obedience was not entirely sincere. He found the concept intriguing and wondered if having a high enough level of faith meant he wouldn't need to rely on issuing commands at all. The system confirmed this thought and pointed out that his way of thinking was quite blunt. Another notification appeared, indicating that due to Park Min-ju's fluctuating faith, he could now listen to her internal thoughts. According to the system, she was trying to run away and actively seeking a method of escape. Changjae silently challenged that conclusion, thinking that if she still wanted to flee, it meant she wasn't truly willing to be his workout partner. The window presented a new goal. He was now required to increase her happiness to a certain threshold within a specific time frame. A reward would be granted upon success. He contemplated whether he should actively work on raising her faith in him. Inside the restroom, Park Min-ju was struggling with the small window, trying to open it. She grumbled to herself, annoyed at how narrow it was, and attempted to squeeze through in hopes of escaping. At that moment, Changjae suddenly appeared behind her and calmly commented that the window was indeed too small for her to escape through. She turned around, visibly shocked and panicked, and hastily claimed she hadn't been trying to run away. She added that she usually took long showers up to 3 hours at times. Changjae agreed with a light tone and explained that he had thought as much, which was why he had come to assist her. He reminded her that now that she had finished showering, they could resume the exercise session. The status window updated again, revealing that Park Min-ju's excitement was beginning to rise once more. They started exercising again. As they moved through the motions, Min-ju's mind felt clouded and disoriented. She couldn't make sense of her actions, questioning why she was doing all of this with a boy like him. Her thoughts drifted to the past, recalling her time in university when friends and upperclassmen would invite her to hang out. Whenever they asked her if she was free or wanted to join them, she always replied coldly that she had no interest in playing around. Changjae had already known she was far from easy. When male classmates tried to approach her, she would tell them bluntly to get lost. She was highly popular among her peers, both in school and at university. During group projects, she would sometimes disappear without responding, and when her sunbaes confronted her, she would apologize vaguely, explaining that she had gone off-grid. Her seniors would usually forgive her, brushing it off by saying the grades were already bad anyway, and would even joke about getting others to complete her part for the sake of preserving her marks. Back in the present, Minju found herself overwhelmed. She questioned why someone like her, who had never heard a single harsh word from others, now stood in such a humiliating position. Chang-jae, having concluded the workout session, informed her that everything was over and she was now all clear. His mind, however, was beginning to spiral. He noticed the scent of her hair and the subtle fragrance of her soap. He couldn't help but wonder where the haughty, arrogant expression from earlier had gone. He asked her if she had enjoyed the session too much. She denied it firmly, insisting that she hadn't felt anything and hadn't enjoyed it at all. The status window displayed new information, revealing that Park Minju was lying. He found her denial amusing and accused her of being shameless, laughing at her hesitation. She grew flustered and asked nervously what he planned to do next. He reminded her that she had just said she hadn't felt anything, as if repeating her own excuse back to her. The status window flickered again, indicating that Park Minju's excitement was continuing to increase during the workout session. Chang-jae observed Minju's reactions closely. He asked her how she was feeling and whether even this exercise routine failed to stir anything within her. Despite the growing tension in the room, Minju maintained a steady expression and insisted once again that she didn't feel anything. Her voice lacked conviction, but she clung to the denial as if it were a shield. Chang-jae, however, was unconvinced. Internally, he noted how transparently she lied. Her eyes, her body language, even the slight quiver in her voice made it obvious. He found her denial frustrating yet fascinating. Minju tried to explain that she wasn't someone who enjoyed physical exercise, that it simply wasn't part of who she was. At that moment, the status window blinked again, informing him that Minju's excitement had increased and that she was currently engulfed in confusion. Chang-jae leaned back slightly and processed that update. If she was truly confused, then that state of disarray might be something he could use to his advantage. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer as he mentally noted that she looked genuinely conflicted, like someone at war with herself. The status window responded again, this time with a command option. It indicated that, by deepening his voice and using a firm tone, he could activate a temporary 10-minute control over her, though he would not be able to manipulate her emotions directly. The profile window for Park Minju appeared once again, clearly listing her as a believer, but one whose thoughts were still erratic and reactive. She tried to refute everything he said, still desperately clinging to the narrative that she didn't want any of this. Successfully completed. The time limit and difficulty level were displayed, along with the reward details. Park Minju's faith had increased, and she was now officially recognized as a regular believer, someone who would try to follow commands even without the use of external pressure. Upon reading this, Chang-jae's face lit up with excitement. He realized that he had succeeded in changing something fundamental within her. As they wrapped up the session, he told her that it was over and she could get down now. He assured her that he would send her home. But as he looked at her more closely, he noticed that her eyes had shut and her body had gone limp. She had fainted, her body clearly unable to handle the physical and emotional strain. Later that night, while she was sleeping beside him on the floor, she began murmuring in her sleep. Chang-jae glanced at her, surprised. It felt strange to see someone like her, usually proud, composed, and cold, reduced to a vulnerable, childlike state. Her voice was soft and mumbled as she called out for her mother and complained that she was hungry. Suddenly, the status window appeared once again, flashing a congratulatory message. Curious, he asked internally what the congratulations were for. The system replied that he had earned bonus experience. When he questioned what that meant, the window explained that his level had increased to 2 and that he had received additional experience for completing a quest related to a believer. His available daily commands had increased to 2 and his maximum follower faith had risen slightly as well. In addition, a new skill had been unlocked. Chang-jae's excitement grew further as he read the notification. He had finally done it. The new skill was titled Cult Leader's Sly Gaslighting, and it allowed him to subtly influence and manipulate a believer's mental state using belief points. The current statistics of Park Minju's faith level were displayed, allowing him to see how far she had progressed and where her resistance still remained. As he continued reading, he couldn't help but marvel at how detailed the system was. The mechanics behind control and influence were far more elaborate than he initially assumed. With mild sarcasm, he wondered who had even come up with such a ridiculous skill name. The status window responded with cold indifference, stating that unnecessary questions would be disregarded. He thought to himself that the system might be insane, but the name wasn't the real issue. What mattered was that everything now revolved around cultivating and managing believers. With more believers came more power, more experience, and deeper influence. The status window reminded him again that increasing a believer's loyalty and faith would lead to greater obedience. He would also gain additional experience by keeping his followers happy. All these new benefits painted a clear picture. His path forward now depended entirely on managing his believers wisely. Beside him, Minju continued sleeping, still murmuring dreamily. She asked her mother not to give her more sausages and mentioned that her jaw hurt.